Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm great. I can move it at 90 degrees. Now, let me see if I got my claw. I got my claw glove on. If you was here, I could put the claw right on you.
Really?
Because I got my claw glove on.
What is the claw?
Looks kind of like a catcher's mitt, because that is the actual size of my hand. Do not adjust your podcast or your YouTube or wherever you watch us. That is actually the size of my hand. That's why I got to wear. That's why I got to. If I could only do the claw, it'd be great.
Speaking of the claw, I guess you saw that people can stream the Iron Claw now. I've seen a lot of people posting that they have finally seen it. I don't know that we got your official verdict on the Ric Flair portrayal, because it felt like that was maybe the most controversial thing that I saw amongst wrestling fans. People did not think that guy did a great job as Ric Flair. What say you?
Yeah, it was horrible. I mean, it was horrible as portraying Ric Flair, but then, if you want to get into the horrible portrayals of stuff and what someone looks like and or sounds like or anything like that, you can get into the kids and all that stuff. But I thought that, again, it's a movie.
Right.
It's a movie. It's not a factual depiction of events that some of them happened. Yes. But, he was, I was going to say he was good as the Iron Sheik, but actually that was Chavo Guerrero. And if you got lost, he was the Iron Sheik. But at that time he was Hussein Khosrow-Vaziri. So yeah, it was, look, man, it's a movie. It's a movie. It was a drama. It was a drama about a tragic family that just dealt with one hit after another, after another, after another. The Ric Flair guy was awful. I think you could have found about 100 more that could actually do, woo, and actually do Rick. Maybe, it didn't look like him. Even the guy, what's the guy there in Alabama or something? The guy that worked his way onto our show that time when we were there.
Who?
You know who I'm talking about, the fake Ric Flair.
Oh, he's in Georgia. You're talking about Nature Boy
Whatever.
Paul Lee. Yeah.
Whatever. He could have done a better job.
Well,
I mean,
can you imagine?
He could have done better than the guy that they got. But, again, it was a movie, man. I thought the Freebirds, they looked good.
Yes.
And it wasn't a movie about wrestling.
Yes.
It was a movie about a family that dealt with tragedy, that was ruled by a tyrannical father that demanded that his kids do what he wanted them to do. And not all of them necessarily wanted to do it. And it was just a tragic story. And that's the way that you have to look at it going in. If you're going into it for a wrestling movie, you're going to the wrong movie.
Well, we hope.
And if you're looking for facts, you're going to the wrong movie, but still.
Hollywood portrayals. Now, it's funny that, how many movies do you think you and I have seen in our lifetime where we would see the little thing at the very beginning that says based on a true story?
Mm-hmm.
And technically this was very much based on a true story. But now that you and I know so much more about this particular subject, it does bring into question every other movie I've ever seen where it says based on a true story. Cause we know, to the larger audience, maybe those are little details, but to you and I as wrestling nerds, we'd be like, hey, that's a pretty big thing there. So it makes me wonder, like all those other movies, right?
All of them, every single one of them. So for example, Walking Tall, movie about Buford Pusser and his life. The first Walking Tall that came out in the 70s was fairly accurate. Not completely accurate, but fairly accurate as far as the battles that Buford Pusser went through as the sheriff there in Tennessee. And yes, he did wrestle briefly for a time before he moved to Tennessee and became a sheriff because his wife didn't like traveling. But it was like one of my oldest brothers knew Buford Pusser. So it was Some of it was true, some of it wasn't, but it was based on his life story. Fast forward to Walking Tall with The Rock. Now, I'm sitting there talking to The Rock, and I go, "Hey, man, you're doing Walking Tall. That's like one of my all-time favorite movies ever. Please, man." I said, "Stay true to the story," you know? And that's where I really got the education where he's like, "Bruce, it's based on the movie Walking Tall.
Right.
It's which was based on a guy's life." He goes, "It's going to be a completely different portrayal, man. It's going to be different. It's going to be based on the same scenario, if you would, but it's going to be based in modern times, like if Buford lived in time in the 90s or the early 2000s." And I was so pissed when I saw it at first. And I told him, I said, "You ruined Walking Tall." And he said, "Yeah, sorry about that, man." But then I watch it, and I think that it is really one of the most fun rock movies that he's done. And I actually enjoy it and watch it every time that it's on now. And then last night, get home, and you know who Chuck Barris is?
I know who Chuck Berry is.
No, Chuck Barris, the Gong Show,
Okay.
the Newlywed Game, the dating game.
Okay.
Okay, so Chuck Barris, for old timers like me who remember the Gong Show and Gene, the dancing machine, yeah, and shit like that. So I was a big Chuck Barris fan. Chuck Barris was the guy that first introduced me to the Unknown comic. It was a comic that wore a sack on his head, just had two eye holes and a mouth. And Chuck Barris wrote a book about his life, or an autobiography, and he talked about that he was also a CIA agent, that he killed people for a living while he was producing the Newlywed Game, the dating game, and the Gong Show, and many others. He's a very successful producer out in Hollywood. And some, like people just didn't know what to believe because he would disappear for weeks at a time and come back. And where you been, Chuck? Yeah, I just, I had weird guy. But I was always a big fan of his. Big fan. And watching this movie, I'm going, how in the hell did I miss this? And it's loaded with stars, man. It's Clooney's in it. Julia Roberts is in it. It's loaded with stars. I'm thinking, how in the hell did this movie slip by me in the theaters back when people went to theater to watch a movie?
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
That's it.
George Clooney, Sam Rockwell, Drew Barrymore. I'll check that out. Yeah. I'm going to have fun with that.
It's interesting, but it's even more interesting if you were a Chuck Barris fan. But it's an interesting movie because chunks of it are very true.
Yes.
The part about being a CIA agent, he said he has come out and said, "Oh yeah, none of that was true." That he made it up, and then there's other times where he just won't answer. So it leaves you wondering, okay, did he say it's not true because it really is?
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So yeah, there he is, man. And he was absolutely, if you watch the show and you watch the Gong Show, you'd probably say, man, this guy is a coke fiend, which he may have been, which they did not talk about in the movie. They didn't say any of that. So maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was just crazy. Some of us are like that anyway, without any cocaine.
Well, we hope we don't need any cocaine today.
No, I don't. I got Prime.
Oh, that's exactly the endorsement that Logan was looking for. Put down the Coke straw and pick up Prime at your local retail establishment.
Sip it slowly, folks.
Yeah. Enjoy responsibly.
Enjoy it responsibly.
And I hope everyone enjoys a big, rare Australian show. Man, we are just days away. As folks are listening to this tonight here in America, you're going to have one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year, Elimination Chamber.
Well, actually, it's going to take place if you're watching live on Saturday. It's 5 a.m. 5 a.m. Eastern. That's 4 a.m. Central. That's 3 a.m. Mountain. That's 2 a.m. Out on the West Coast.
So I'm just calling it tonight. I understand technically it's Saturday morning, but hey, folks,
you know what you mean.
Yeah, it's a different world, and WWE is a global property, and I like that they're doing it this way. I mean, I know you weren't there for SummerSlam '92, but as I understand it, that aired on a delay, and I don't know, live is just more fun, right?
Live is much more fun and much more dangerous.
Yeah,
nothing can go wrong if it's live.
Oh, I've heard that before.
If you have any time to fix something, nothing can go wrong. It was meant to happen.
Well, a lot of things are meant to happen this weekend. Elimination Chamber is looking pretty strong. We got Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton versus Bobby Lashley versus LA Knight versus Kevin Owens versus Logan Paul. And they're all battling it out inside the Elimination Chamber for the right to take on Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. The women's Elimination Chamber is Becky Lynch versus Bianca Belair versus Liv Morgan versus Tiffany Stratton, Roll Tide, versus Naomi versus Raquel Rodriguez. And we got some new blood in there. I mean, this is the first big time event that Tiffany Stratton, I know she was a surprise at the Rumble, but man, NXT just moving on up, pulling for her. And Raquel Rodriguez, I don't think she's been in a match like this before. This will be fun. And the winner will take on the winner of the Rhea Ripley Nia Jax match, which is also happening at Elimination Chamber for that title at WrestleMania. So pretty loaded card, including the Judgment Day defending the tag titles against the New Catch Republic. And maybe the thing I'm looking forward to the most, the Grayson Waller effect. We'll have our boy Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. Man, you guys have had a lot of momentum. This is a fun pay-per-view. The road to WrestleMania is going to continue to get more and more entertaining. I have a feeling, Bruce. What say you?
It's a fun time to be in the business, and I think that this is going to be one of those shows. It's kind of like the sleeper where on the outside you're going, wait a minute. But I think it's going to over-deliver as we kind of like to do, and I think it's going to be an awful lot of fun. I'm going to be watching it. I'm getting up. I am getting up at 4:30. I'm going to ask my sweet wife to get up with me and to make me some breakfast so I can sit there in my recliner. I can put my arm there at 90 degrees like that. And then I can watch the show and then I'll go back to bed. Well, actually, I'll probably text a little bit and then I'll go back.
Tell the truth. Is this the only time you were kind of low-key excited about having a tricep and shoulder replacement? Because technically you can't fly 25 hours there and 25 hours back. You saved yourself 50
Honestly,
hours of
no,
air travel.
I would really much rather be there.
You love Australia though. Every time you go.
I do love Australia. I absolutely love Australia. And I do wish that that I could have been there, and but I also took 2 6-hour flights. What the hell is that? Do you hear that?
No.
Sounds like there's a helicopter or something landing on my house. But I took 2 6-hour flights in a 24-hour period. So 12 hours I sat on a plane yesterday, and I'm just so beyond planes. And you think that this was swollen now, man. It was like, I'm not kidding you. This thing was like a catcher's mitt.
Yeah.
Everybody would come by and just look at my hand and go, oh, dude. Your hand, is that why you got the thing? I go, no, my hand is with my tricep. But anyway.
You gonna call it what you called it to me? You referred to your hand. You said, I've got a certain type of hand.
Okay, give me a can.
Okay, we're gonna play dumb today. I'm cool with that. Hey, before we get going,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I really don't know what I'm talking about either, because we did a poll a couple of weeks ago.
That's why I like these.
I know you do. Boys and girls, we have a whole team of folks who help us behind the scenes and all my podcasts over here. We got people who help us with YouTube and people who help us with social and people who help us, like Dave Silva. He's our producer for the show. So he's doing the camera.
But he doesn't really help us. He hinders us most of the time.
Okay. Can you just let me get this thought out? I'm just saying, we got a lot of people pulling in the same direction, working on the same stuff. And then occasionally the star of the show will pop his head up. I don't know. Maybe like the groundhog once a year. And he'll say, Hey, no, we're going to record tomorrow morning first thing, and I ain't talking about that. I want to talk about this. And so that's what we're doing today. We did a poll a few weeks back about tag teams. Dudley's won, Nasties came in second. So
we did the Dudleys.
We'll do the Nasties.
And we did the winners.
And you were like, nah, I want to talk about booking. And so we're going to be talking about, and this is something that we have teased for years. I actually get questioned about this at least once a month for the past several years. When are you going to talk about the evolution of creative? Well, I guess this will be like part one of that, because I'm sure there will be a whole lot of conversation about the evolution of creative inside of WWE. But today we're going to travel around the country and talk about the different booking philosophies and mentalities from the heads of the major 5 families. No, I'm not talking about the mob. I'm talking about territory wrestling.
Well, but let me explain to you because you're sitting there going, okay, Bruce got a hair up his behind and just wanted to, this, that, or the other. But inside, let me give you a little bit of background. So, CM Punk, I'm giving you information. I probably shouldn't, but CM Punk, we spent a weekend here in Connecticut when he first came back, and he came over to the house, and we went through like this plethora of stuff in the other room over there. And he was just asking so many questions about, booking and bookers and who was this and who was that? And why did they do it this way? Why did they do it that way? And I had some of Paul's old booking books from the 40s, and he
Mr.
was
Bosch.
going through it. Yeah. And he was just going through it, mesmerized, and probably would still be here if I didn't kick him out. But that was kind of the genesis of it. Was, we've never really just kind of got into people think they understand,
right?
What a booker is, or what the business was like back then. And back then it was even, a million times more difficult to get into and actually get into the inner workings, and to be able to get into the mind of the guy that really was running things, who was really putting all those matches together and the angles together and bringing in the talent and what have you. And I had a very innocent way, because I was a kid and I was hanging around with Mr. Bosch. So they knew that, like, I worked there. I don't think a lot of times, at least at first, they realized how young I was, but they would use me as a sounding board to throw ideas at me. Go, hey, what if we did this, or what if we did that? And did you like that? Did you think that really pissed the crowd off enough, or was the crowd really happy on different things like that? And I learned in a way that was different than most, because I actually got to go pick Bill Watts up at the airport, go take Gary Hart, to go get something at Jack in the Box, and just had time to be able to, in an innocent way, not knowing, because I really didn't know. I wasn't smart to the business. Ask them questions.
Right.
And walk in on, if I wasn't gimped up and had a longer cord, I would walk in and show you the actual ring where I walked in for the first time and saw Paul Bosch, Gary Hart, and Bronco Lubitsch huddled around a ring. And I'll take a picture of it, send it so Dave can insert it here. And they had these clay figures, and they had the clay figure tied up in the ropes and hanging backwards. And Gary was explaining, I believe it was Bruiser Brody, was going to hook his leg in the rope like this, brother, and then he comes back and he's hanging like this, so therefore he can't go anywhere. That's where we get the DQ. Now, a lot of times when I would walk in with coffee and drinks, they would stop talking. But it mesmerized me that they were playing with what I consider toy wrestlers in a toy wrestling ring to lay out a finish for that evening's matches. And oh my God, that's how they do it. And it was one of those aha moments that I just, I hung on to forever because I thought that, man, they do this every, every week when they're back there in these closed door meetings. They've got toy wrestlers. They're going, he's going to get him like this. Then he's going to pin him like that. And that wasn't true, but that was,
it happened that one time.
It happened that time. Yes. And then I happened to, walk in with the tab and the coffee and Coke and all that good stuff. Coca-Cola.
Yes.
Cola.
Well, it's fun to hear about sort of your roots in wrestling. And I think that's important. So I'm glad we're going to take time to do that. And we're excited to tell you how you can learn about the roots of that other family member of yours. I'm talking about your dogs. I'm talking about EMBARKvet.com. We are so excited to be talking about this product because Bruce and I really, really believe in it. Linked in today's description for the episode you're looking at right now, you can actually see the report that Bruce got on his dog, old Bean Furnham. And I want you to take a look at that because it'll give you an idea of what to expect when you do this for your dog. And let me just give you a little pro tip. This is a home run for the dog lovers in your household, whether it's your mom, your wife, your kids, everybody is going to love this report. For example, with Bean, we find out officially that old Bean is 64.2% American Pit Bull Terrier, 22.1% Australian Cattle Dog, and 13.7% American Bulldog. Not only that, they break down exactly all the different characteristics of those breeds, and they even tell you some genetic stats, like what is your dog's wolfiness? What is their projected adult weight? Where are they in their lifespan, if you will? Just all the information, including their family tree. And this is for your pet, the only family member who can't talk to you. So it's really awesome to be able to get that information, and feel like you can better understand what your dog wants and needs and where they come from. Like genetic health risks, they're going to screen for more than 250 of these. And they're going to know, hey, this breed is more susceptible to this or that. Something you and I, as just pet owners, we wouldn't know. You'll also be able to find and connect with other dogs who share their dog's DNA. They've got the world's first canine relative finder. How about that? A little family tree action here for your dog. This is all possible thanks to this incredible product, the EMBARK Breed and Health Test. We want you to check it out at EMBARKvet.com. Be sure to use our promo code. They're supporting Something to Wrestle. We would love if you would support them. Go right now to EMBARKvet.com. You'll get free shipping and save $50 on that breed and health test when you use our promo code WRESTLE. They give you a full breakdown. Like Bruce knows everything there is to know about American Pit Bull Terriers and Australian Cattle Dogs and American Bulldogs now, all because of this test. And that genetic breed information, man, it's helpful to understand how to train them better and how to just enrich their life and figure out what their physical and emotional needs are. You really want to understand your dog better. And that's why we believe you need this. You need EMBARKvet.com. Use our promo code WRESTLE. Get the dog DNA test that's trusted by millions. And they've got a limited time offer on that breed and health test. Free shipping and $50 off when you go to EMBARKvet.com and use our promo code WRESTLE. That's EMBARKVET.com. Our promo code WRESTLE.
And it's there where you can learn about when you're asking yourself these questions about why does my dog do this?
Right.
Like, why does she like turn and back up and like back into things? Because that's how cattle dogs do it. Okay. Is it like they'll go out and they'll herd sheep or whatever, or cattle, and then they'll they'll back them into where they want them to go. And it all adds up to 100% good puppy dog and the bestest puppy dogs in the whole wide world. Because when you know your dog, then they're going to know you even more. And that's the best part of it. And you get it even more. Cause you can just, seriously, we go back and look and go, oh yeah, that's the pit bull in her, or yeah, that's the bulldog in her. But she's got that cattle dog down, man. And she's the best.
She is the best, and so is EMBARK. Check them out. They are longtime sponsors of our program. We love our dogs. I love Ginger and Baby. He loves Bean and the rest of that rowdy bunch up there. But learning more about those dogs, man, it's a big part of our fandom of this product. And I'm telling you, your wives, your kids, your moms, your sisters, the women in your life, they're going to melt when they see this information. I can't recommend it enough. EMBARKvet.com. Use that promo code WRESTLE. Hey, so let's talk about the different territories. And I guess we'll start, we'll go left to right. We'll talk about Don Owen, based out of Oregon. Don was a promoter for over 60 years, probably one of the longest running territories and promoters. I mean, and super well respected. Pacific Northwest Wrestling was one of the cornerstones of the NWA. Tell us about Don Owen.
Yeah, well, so Don Owen ran Portland, Seattle, kind of in the whole Northwest part of the states. Didn't necessarily go into Northern California because that was more Roy Shires and what have you. And Don ran a solid territory. You could go there and you could work. You worked every night, and you made a little money. You didn't get rich, unless you're Buddy Rose or Roddy Piper. But even then, they didn't get super rich. But they made money, and they made steady money. And Don was one of those guys. He liked to have control. He would take input from guys that he trusted. People like Stan Stasiak would advise him. And I don't know that Don necessarily until later in life ever really had, a booker all the time. He would have someone he would trust. He had his brother Elton, who ran Eugene, Oregon. I believe that's correct. And Elton would book Eugene. Right. And Elton was the kind of guy, Elton loved the shoot. Okay. So Elton would have one match every show where he would have the guys go out and, all right, you guys go out and have your match. And whoever wins gets an extra $20 or whatever, and have the guys shoot. Well, the boys being the boys, of course, I think at first some of them bit into it, and I was like, all right, let's go out there. I want that $20. But then they figured out that, hey, we can go out there and work the shoot, and we'll split the money. In later years is exactly what they all did, And I think Tom was like shooter champion for like 3 or 4 weeks, and he would trade it with Kurt Hennig and Brett Sawyer and different guys, and they would go back and forth, put each other over. But in later years, Piper helped with the book. Buddy Rose was a huge star. That, man, you talk about huge stars, territorial stars, and I think Buddy Rose is one of the most overlooked mega territorial star that ever was. Buddy was doing Ric Flair before Ric Flair even knew what the hell Ric Flair was.
Right.
Buddy was a limousine riding, jet flying son of a gun, always, had a gaggle of beautiful women with him, but he actually got a plane and flew from town to town in the territory and lived his gimmick to the hilt. So Buddy would help write his own stories, man, and he would help bring guys in because guys came in and they saw the success of the territory doing well. So you call the top guy. So when Buddy was the top guy, with that came the responsibility of keeping the territory on top and keeping the territory hot. So Buddy would suggest to Don, hey, what if we bring this guy in? What if we bring that guy in? I can work a program with him. Dutch Savage was another one that helped out quite a bit up there. Rip Oliver helped with the booking up there and was a mainstay. And I think, God, I'm trying to remember what the hell Rip's gimmick was. It was like the Top Gun gimmick. It may have been Top Gun, been his gimmick. But he wore a mask, and then, he took it off. And Dave Sierra was another one. Worked. But I think that
I saw Dave, I don't mean to cut you off, but Rip Oliver was nicknamed Super Ninja, the Gestapo,
Super Ninja,
and Crippler Rip Oliver.
Yeah. And Dave Sierra was Top Gun.
Okay.
I bet you. Yeah. But these guys would work in tandem. They'd work together and bring ideas to Don. And Don was, I think, a promoter and ran his territory where it was a collaboration from the talent. Later on, Piper would come in and go, I'll take over the book. But, Roddy did. want to be a booker. Roddy was worried about Roddy. Roddy wanted to help Don and would do whatever he could to help Don because Don gave him his first big break in his mind. And that's where Roddy lived, was in Oregon. So Roddy had a soft spot for Don. When Roddy went to WWE first time, Roddy would not go in a WWE event in Portland, Oregon, because he felt it was going against Don Owens.
Right.
So that's the kind of loyalty that Don had. Don was a very fair man, very nice man, and, you know, pulled no punches, but was easy to work with. And then the last booker in the Portland territory was Lynn Denton, the grappler. And Lynn, you know, booked it for a long time. And he and Roddy actually were partners in Piper's Pit Oil Change. I think that's what it was called, where Lynn ran Roddy's, it was like a 10-minute oil change gimmick there in Orland called Piper's Pit, you know, oil change. That's where you go into pull into the pit, get your oil change, you're out 10 minutes.
How about that?
And Lynn managed those for him, but Lynn was also the booker there and did a good job until kind of, you know, finally just, as with everything else, evolution. And it just no longer weekly wrestling in markets just wasn't supported anymore. And they tore down the Rose Garden, which is where they ran in Portland. And there just wasn't anything left anymore. But Lynn was the last booker there. And most of the time, what you would see happen is you would have a booker. And the booker was the guy who brought the talent into the territory. So if you were friends with the booker, wherever the booker went, you could usually tell, okay, who's going to follow him? Who's his crew going to be? And a good booker usually had a crew of guys that were loyal to him. So that if he had a falling out with a promoter, that promoter usually knew, okay, oh God, if I lose him, then I'm losing all these other guys. Not all the time. A lot of guys, not everybody would follow right away. Usually, it's just by attrition they would. But you always wanted to have a booker that's going to bring an influx of new talent. But you also want one that can take the talent, the hot talent that is there at the time, and work with them and be able to kind of work with them, and then bring your guys in slowly but surely. And it just kept the markets fresh. It kept the towns fresh. It kept the territory fresh by having a new booker brought in new talent, and keep a few of the same, the mainstays, the guys that live there, the guys that may have a piece of the promotion. Sometimes they would stay, and the new booker would come in and work with them and bring in their own guys.
Let's talk a little bit about Don Owen, and why do you think I mean, I know he had a reputation for being a fair payoff guy and all that jazz, but how or why do you think he inspired so much loyalty amongst the talent? I mean, like, by the time Piper went through Mid-Atlantic before he went to New York. So he clearly had a soft spot for him, but he was working other places, but he didn't want to compete against him. So there had to be something. How did Don approach the business that was different from everyone else?
I think Don had stability. If you worked for Don and Don gave you his word that, all right, we're going to book you and you're going to work every week, and this is around what you're going to make. His word was his bond. And you knew you were there. You knew you were good. And I think there was a little bit, part of Don in that some guys would take advantage, maybe stay, outstay their welcome. Did I say that right? But he was steady. It wasn't, you knew you were going to work every week. You knew you were going to be on TV. You knew, because Don only had so many guys. He only had so many slots. Didn't bring in more guys than he could use, and used everybody he had. So that was the appeal, man. You got to do TV. and you got to work every night. So that was, Don was a man of his word, paid well for a territory that size, and you knew that you had a job, and he would help you get, if you went to Don Owens and said, Don, man, oh my God, I can't take this Pacific Northwest anymore. Can you get me booked somewhere? Don was always very happy to pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got this kid, and we're going to finish him up. Can you use him? He would find them someplace to go. He would make that call and help them get booked elsewhere. Not everybody would do that. Hey, you want to leave? Get the hell out. I'm done with you. Don would help you. And I think for the guys, that was like Piper's thing. For the guys that would walk out on Don, man, Roddy would, he would never forget, because he was just, Roddy was that kind of guy. He was very loyal.
Talk to me a little bit about the way other promoters looked at Don, like in terms of Paul Bosch, was he held in high regard as well?
I think so. Not for our Pacific Northwest fans. I'm sorry, man. I'm from Texas.
All right.
And being in the Pacific Northwest, where it rains 98% of the time and has the highest suicide rate in the nation, just not a place for me where I would want to live. And for a lot of guys, that's how they looked at it, man. Portland. Portland was someplace you could go a lot of times where nobody else would take you. So Portland was a destination that it was good work. It was solid work. I know Tom, my brother Tom, went to Portland, had a hell of a run. Was there Brett Wayne Sawyer, and they had a blast. Stayed at the Bomber Hotel in Portland, man. That's where they lived. And I actually tried to go by the Bomber. The Bomber is no longer there, but it had an old Bomber airplane. That was its logo. It was up on a post.
Right.
And the old Bomber Hotel. God, that's a motel, not a hotel, a motel. Had little kitchenettes and stuff in it. And that's where everybody stayed. It was just a good place to go. So other promoters were like, you know what, man? Like we would say, go away, learn a new hold, and then come back. Portland was a good place to do that because it was far enough away. Look, you didn't. How many times can you go back and look in the wrestling magazines and see anything from Portland wrestling? You didn't, because the magazines, the guys didn't go up there and follow it.
Right.
So you could pretty much hide in plain sight in the Pacific Northwest. And it was a good place to go and try a new gimmick. Try something different. And be able to be off of the grid and pretty much go anywhere else in the country, and you're brand new all over again.
Talk to me a little bit about, the longevity. I mean, as I understand it, Don had TV in Portland. I guess it was called Big Time Wrestling once upon a time. And it was from 52 to 91. I mean, that's remarkable.
It's not a bad run.
Yeah. I mean, to be on TV in 52 is unbelievable. And it was really a who's who came through there. Stan Stasiak, Dizzy Hogan, who we know is going to become the future Brutus, the freaking Barber Beefcake, Kurt Hennig, Mad Dog Vachon, Nick Bockwinkel, Gorgeous George, before he was Gorgeous George, I guess, but Roddy Piper, Buddy Rose. I mean, so many that we've all heard of, all made a name for themselves here in Portland as well. He kind of probably, I mean, I know we've heard of like outlaw promotions. Like I know Randy Savage's dad, Mr. Poffo, was a quote unquote outlaw promotion. Did outlaw promotions exist up there, or did he really kind of have a monopoly in the whole area?
I don't know if it's a monopoly, but who else would want to run up there?
Okay.
Stu was to the north with Calgary, and to the south of him was Roy Shire. It just was, there wasn't enough room. Portland, Seattle, maybe, but that whole area, it's not going to support a second promotion.
Right.
There's not a lot of room. You're going to get a couple local guys maybe, but for the most part, it was the only game in town because it was just the only game in town. And it's how many ice cream stands can you have in Luckenbach? It's a small town. You got one. So it's the same thing I think with wrestling as far as back in the day with Portland wrestling in Seattle and that whole area.
Let's talk about his booking philosophy. I know you said he had different, bookers who went through there, but was there like a hallmark or a trademark? Like I know for certain we saw things like the Midnight Rider or the Dusty Finish. Like those were classic Dusty things, and I'm sure there's a bunch of others, but was there like a hallmark or something you could always count on? Hey, well, it's Portland, so they all do blah blah blah. Like we've heard people say, well, ECW's blood and guts, and well, that's that Memphis shit or whatever people say. Was there something that you could just count on growing up in the business? Like, well, this is something they always go back to, Portland.
Solid wrestling.
Okay.
That's what they did. Don didn't like the gimmicks. Don kept it simple. And it was all about the wrestling. So it was just very simple.
We should talk about another promoter here. One that I know was near and dear to Pat Patterson, Mr. Roy Shire, big time wrestling based out of San Francisco. The San Francisco territory in and of itself is a pretty legendary territory. What can you tell us about Roy Shire? I mean, as I understand it, he was a wrestler who blew out his knee and then became like a promoter after that and found a home in the Cow Palace of all places. This is an interesting guy.
Yeah, Roy ran Northern California. Roy ran San Francisco and the surrounding areas, obviously San Jose, Sacramento. And Roy was one of those old tough guys. By God, you're going to do it my way or I'll knock you out. I'll kick your ass out of here. But Roy was very successful, very successful. Roy booked his own territory and he kept his guys in line in many ways, kind of like Bill Watts did out of fear, and was a tough guy. But Roy was also, God, man, he was very sharp. When you hear about Eddie Graham and the greats, the old time bookers and promoters that ran their territory with an iron fist, but were also very creative in what they did and how they did it, and could take pretty much any crew and make them work in their territory. Roy Shires was one of those guys. So Roy had, a plethora of talent. Mad Dog Vachon helped get Pat Patterson into San Francisco. Originally, he was going to be Roy's tag team partner, and Roy just never really came out of it, and Roy just stayed behind the scenes. But in comes Pat, and Pat always tells a story about the first time that he met Roy. And Pat was a gay man, that it wasn't cool to be gay in the 60s and 70s. All right. You didn't come out and tell people that you were gay. You hid. And for the most part, kept that to yourself. And in the business, Pat had a reputation, an impeccable reputation from the standpoint of being a great worker and a great guy and honest, and did very well for you when he came in. And Roy Shire says, I hear a lot of rumors. And Pat was like, well, let me just forget about the rumors. Let me tell you exactly what it is. I'm gay. I've got a friend. His name is Louie. He lives with me. And if you've got a problem with that, I'll leave right now. But never enters into my business. And I want to live my life, and I'm going to live my life. He's like, oh, all right then, and Pat was just completely honest with him. And Roy was like, okay, because Pat was a great worker.
Right.
And he would go to Pat for finishes. And he would go to Pat and say, what do you think about this guy? Because Pat had worked a little bit, and Pat was a mainstay God, I think he was there 14 years on and off. But it was, Pat was a megastar. First time he ever bought a house, and bought this big, beautiful house out on a hill somewhere. And, to him, that was success. I don't think Pat ever envisioned himself leaving San Francisco because he loved it. He loved the area, and he liked working for Roy. I don't think he liked Roy all that much, but San Francisco was exciting. It wasn't the, I'll call it the AWA, just straight wrestling. It was exciting. They had a little guy. You could have a little fun, and brought in guys like Rocky Johnson, brought in people like, you're looking at Roy Shires and the Bat. And I think the Bat, now I can't remember his name. Marino, I believe. But it's a place where you had Pat and you had Ray Stevens. Ray Stevens was another blonde bomber, and Pat and Ray Stevens were one of the greatest tag teams in the history of the business ever. Today, they would be a top tag team. And you also had people like Peter Maivia. Peter, coming over from the islands, and Peter was a huge star there because there was a big Samoan community in San Francisco and in the Pacific Northwest. So Peter was, man, he was a god to them, and he represented the Samoan people. That's where Afa and Sika, as the story goes, was Pat and Peter had a match. Pat had screwed Peter in the match, and a riot ensues. And as they're fighting their way back to the dressing room, coming from above in the vomitory and from the bleachers, here comes Afa and Sika, and jumped off of the vomitory down on to Pat and Ray, and they had to fight their way through. And there were these two crazy guys. Peter was able to go and talk to them and like, guys, calm down. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Let me fight my fights. You guys don't get involved. It's bad, because the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to get thrown in jail. This is going to be bad for you. I can do this. I'll overcome. If you believe in me. Often Sika, friendly with Peter. Peter, help get them into the business and get them to train and what have you. And that was the beginning of Afa and Sika. So it was, but Peter had that power with the Samoan people, because it was like, Peter went back and was made a high chief and did the tattoo gimmick and all that stuff. Damn near died getting the chief tattoos. But he was a mega star in the Pacific Northwest, or in San Francisco and that area. You also have Rocky Johnson. Rocky came in, and Rocky, man, set the place on fire, because Rocky was as charismatic as they got. And the beautiful thing about San Francisco, man, was that crew, Pepper Gomez. Oh my God, just the stars that came out of there. They all were very close. I would go through Pat's scrapbooks and his photo albums and stuff, and see the parties at Maivia's house, and Peter playing the ukulele and everybody around. It was just a who's who of the wrestling business. Now, Roy didn't like heels and baby faces fraternizing outside, but when you would go to each other's house, that was different. That was okay. And it was just such a camaraderie and a brotherhood in San Francisco, that everybody, it was tight knit. It was solid. They took care of one another. Pat was able to go babyface, heel, babyface, just several times, and they always bought it. And it was run, and it was tough to make it there, because you had to satisfy one guy, Roy Shires, and Roy was tough, and he was good payoff guy, not great, but it was solid. And it was another one that you knew if you got over in San Francisco, that pretty much you could get over any place else. And you had steady work. And Roy was one. He would take, he would take ideas from Pat. He would take ideas from guys that would offer, but for the most part, Roy wanted it his way. And if Roy made every town, every night, and ran them. And Pat would tell the story about one, like the one time that Roy was not going to make a spot show somewhere. And he gave Pat the finishes. And Pat decided to have some fun and do some different things and all this shit. And he said he got his ass chewed out because it wasn't exactly as Roy had told him to do. So Roy ran with an iron fist, and I think that is what eventually ran Roy out of business, was no flexibility. When it came time to, the business is changing. You either change or you die. And Roy didn't want to change, and Roy wanted to keep running it the way that he ran it from day one. And after a while, that just didn't work. The big thing in San Francisco was the yearly battle royal. He would bring in people from the AWA. He'd bring in people from all over the place and be in the battle royal. And that was the big event, the big yearly event at the Cow Palace was the big battle royal. And I think Roy's ruling of, iron fist, it's my way or no way, is eventually just what really pushed Roy out of the business. And he wasn't having fun anymore. He just, he was done. He was an old cowboy, man, basically.
Talk to me a little bit about what Johnny Doyle and Red Bastien did to help Roy Shire. I mean, I thought that those were like his lieutenant bookers, but you were kind of saying he did it all himself. Was that just rumor and innuendo, or did Johnny Doyle and Red Bastien do anything?
No, they definitely helped. I mean, and that's where also Bastien, but you're going back way to the early days. That's where Bastien kind of got the reputation where Red really learned, because Red is another one who was a great booker. Red helped out with the booking in Dallas for a while with, in between Gary Hart's ins and outs. Red Bastien booked there, but Red learned a lot of his booking style from Roy Shire. And Red was one of those trusted confidants in the early days that would help Roy and get him through with ideas. Red was masterful mind, I thought.
Talk to me a little bit about, when we're talking about that era, you mentioned briefly Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. I mean, I think Ray Stevens probably doesn't get his flowers enough. Everybody who I know that's older than me, that was around to see that stuff, said they were the greatest tag team of all time. You couldn't believe how far ahead of their time they were as tag team performers. And even a guy like Ric Flair would say his favorite wrestler growing up, the reason he would ask his dad to take him to the matches is so he could see Ray Stevens. Like even the flip in the corner, he borrowed that from Ray Stevens and
stole it
straight up. And he would admit to that, because and I know that was a criticism for Flair over the years where they said, oh, he was a routine man. I think Bret Hart has even said it was, when you've seen one Ric Flair match, you've seen them all. He was a routine man. But if you ask Rick about that, Rick would say when his dad would take him to the matches to see Ray Stevens, if Ray didn't do the flip in the corner, he was disappointed. And he sort of equated it to like, hey, if you're going to go see Elvis, yeah, you'll listen to the new stuff, but you want him to play the hits. And I understand that. And I don't think we talk about Ray Stevens enough. Do you think it's just because it was before cable television is what it is, and there's just not a lot of that footage out there? Or why doesn't Ray Stevens get the props that maybe he deserves?
I don't think that Ray was ever on a national stage to get those props for as many people to see him. Ray was huge in San Francisco. Ray was huge in the AWA. Ray was huge in the WWF and the Carolinas and Atlanta. Beyond that, which, by the way, had that kind of career and work on top in all of those territories is saying something.
Yeah.
So, Ray was just this magnificent worker. And I think that to Rick's point, man, you were disappointed if you didn't see Ray do the bump. But Ray went into the bump differently every time. And Ray couldn't do the same match. And here's the difference between Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. Ray could go out and tear the house down, but he couldn't do the same thing twice.
Okay.
If you asked him to do the same match the next night, he would look at you and go, "What did we do last night?"
I got you.
I went out and partied last night. I have no idea what the hell the match was last night. He had to be different. He went out there on instinct, gut, feel, and he would listen to the audience. And every match was different. He didn't do his routine just to do his routine.
Right.
He made his routine fit to the audience that night. And the audience wasn't coming with it, then okay, he knew how to get the audience up, take them down, take them for a ride. That was the difference in Ray Stevens. But Ray Stevens couldn't tell you how he did it. Ray Stevens could not tell you how, okay, go out and do this. Couldn't tell you how he did it. Pat could go out and tear the house down every night, have a different match every night, and listen. But Pat would tell you why he did every single thing that he did and why it mattered. And here's how and why you should do this and try this. Pat understood the business to that level that he could teach other people how to put things into place in their matches. Pat was a leader, and Ray was a feeler. Ray just went out and performed based on his gut instinct and what he felt that night. Was a tremendous heel and a great baby face. Much better heel because you believed him and you believed everything that Ray did. But even when many years later, when we brought Ray in to try and be an agent, Ray just couldn't do it because Ray knew what Ray would do, but Ray only knew what Ray would do once Ray got into the ring. Couldn't tell you what his match was beforehand. He get you a finish, yeah, and he would do that to a T, but the rest of it, had to call it out there. Had to go out there and see what that audience that night was buying, and then he would make his match fit. And he would bring the audience up to a crescendo. But he couldn't tell you how he did it. Ever. And as much as we tried to, teach him to teach, he was just like, kid, I got to be out there. Now, if I was in the ring with him, I could teach him. But even that, I think that Ray could tell you what to do in the moment.
Right.
But he couldn't tell you why. Pat could tell you why. Pat could tell you how to either abbreviate or to adjust and tell you what to do. But, Ray just did it. Ray was probably the single best, just natural in the business. There have been a few, but I think Ray was the best. And especially after I got to know him, was that, man, he's just a natural performer. He's just a guy that was meant to go out and perform.
Right.
And that was Ray Stevens in a nutshell. And that's what made him so great.
Let's talk about how Shire's deal comes to an end here. I mean, I guess, as the territory started to get smaller and smaller and that business starts to dry up, what happened with him and Vern Gagne there at the end? Do you recall?
Well, I think it was more over, I want to say Denver, but Roy would try and branch out, and Vern would go in and run Denver. And Vern would go in and run Denver, a lot of times with the big battle royal type shit. I just think it was more than anything one of those old timer disagreements over using talent, how they use talent and why. And Vern was getting bigger. And Vern wanted to go into San Francisco. And I think that Roy was like, no, San Francisco's mine. He said, well, we'll work together. And then I think Vern just kind of burned him and tried to push him out and bully him. And I think that, I don't think Roy had any fight left in him at that point. I think Roy went as far as he could, looked at what money he had. And again, you got to go back and look at during those times, a lot of that was cash business.
Yes.
So, Roy had his ranch and his house and all that. And I think that Roy just kind of was done. Didn't want to fight anymore. It just kind of went out to pasture. And Vern came in and tried to take it over.
As I've heard, Roy Shire allegedly did some sort of an interview where he quote unquote broke kayfabe. Is that right?
Look, I mean, there was a time, I think, when Roy was done, where he was, I'll burn it down. Yeah, there were guys, but this is what's funny, man. Roy Shire did a thing where he broke kayfabe and he exposed the business. Let's not forget there was guys. It's happened throughout history where guys have exposed the business, if you will. And it's hot for a week or two, and then it just disappears. People want to be entertained. Yeah, Roy did an interview with the newspaper.
LA Times, right?
Yeah. Okay, great. So did Ron Starr. People forget the first promoter, to my knowledge, and there probably were others, but the first promoter to, quote, expose the business and go to a athletic commission was Vern Gagne. Vern went to the athletic commission and says, hey guys, we're not a sport. This is a work. We're working here. Why are you supervising us and trying to tell us what to do and take taxes from us like we're a real sport? We're not a sport. We're entertainment. This is a work. This is an exhibition. So when everybody would get hot about, oh my God, the WWE, they exposed the business with the New Jersey and New York Athletic Commission. Man, we learned that from Vern. Vern did it. Vern got it done first. And I'm not knocking him because to me, that's smart business. That was the right thing to do. But Vern always gets a pass. Because he ran his as a real legitimate thing. No, he didn't. Man, he was smart. He went in and got the athletic commission to say, oh, yeah, well, I guess it is work. We know who's going to win and who's going to lose. Come on, guys. Be real. Are you that dumb? And that insulted the commission enough to go, no. The commission looked at it as if they did, it would expose them.
Right.
Because now they're overseeing a mixed contest. Really? Do you want to do that? So it was, I always thought that was genius. Some guys really were pissed off at Vern for doing that. I remembered hearing about it, and as much as we bitched about the commission in Texas, they took 5%, man, 5% off the top, went to the Wrestling and Boxing Athletic Commission. For what? You know what they did? They came in, collected contracts, counted tickets, and took their 5% and left.
And maybe took blood pressure.
Nothing. What's that?
Maybe took blood pressure.
Well, no, the doctors took blood pressure.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I've always thought that the commission states, I've heard wrestlers like years ago say, yeah, they just come in the locker room, watch us change clothes creepily, take a couple of guys' blood pressure, and then ask for autographs and pictures.
It was a joke.
Yes.
And again, when you think about it, it's like there were guys that were too proud. Oh, Bosch, man. One of them. Not going to ever admit that this is not on the up and up.
Right.
That would destroy the business. But then bitch about the 5%. And bitch internally about how, well, we're a work business. And to me, it was like every time, Ron Starr did a expose, kind of like Roy Shire's did but it got national. AP picked it up and it went all over the place, more so than any others had at that point. And boy, everybody was like, Ron Starr's done in this business. He's never going to work again. By God, if we see him, we're going to kill him. 6 months later, he's main event in LA.
Right.
So, it's like, oh my God, I'm as a kid going, listening to this from the outside, not really even understanding it, just thinking like, this is crazy. And once you get into it and understand it and see the inner workings of it, it's ludicrous. You have a government agency, a government commission, athletic commission, that is taking your 5% off the top. And then for what? For what? What did they do? What did they offer? What protection did they give anybody? Nothing. Nothing. They sat in the locker room and drank a lot of times. Just, yeah, it was a joke.
Well, let me give you a little pro tip on something that will do something and is not a joke. Talking about our friends at BLUECHEW, a day one sponsor for us here on Something to Wrestle. We really believe in this product. We know you will too. If you haven't tried it already, what are you waiting for? We're going to hook you up. How about free? How's that sound? Just pay $5 shipping and BLUECHEW is going to hook you up. You see, they're a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is simple. You sign up at BlueChew.com, you consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. It's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. But there won't be anything discreet about your package. BlueChew wants to help you have better sex. So discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. And here's a special deal. How about trying BlueChew free when you use our promo code WRESTLE at checkout? Just pay the $5 shipping. That's it. It's BlueChew.com. The promo code is WRESTLE and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast and our wieners. Stu Hart is our next promoter we should talk about. Stampede Wrestling. This guy has a legit background. He's a shooter, if you will, and it becomes a wrestling family. He's got the Stampede Wrestling Organization, and of course, he's got the infamous dungeon down in his basement. But he was, as much as we want to talk about different bookers today, when I think of Stu more often as a trainer than a booker. What say you?
I think of Stu as an innovator and a promoter, and yes, definitely a trainer. But I think what was important about, Stu Hart was, Stu's up in Calgary, and again, not in Calgary, but not someplace I'd want to live. Tough trips there. I mean, long, you got Red Deer, Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, just all those, brutal trips out of Calgary. I look at Stu as a great promoter. I look at Stu as a guy that ran a territory, and Stu booked it. Stu promoted it. Stu did it all. And whether he did it all because he was cheap or whether he did it all because he was smart, I'm going to go with the smart because of the way that he did it. And Stu would train guys. It was a training ground. If you had somebody that had some raw talent, and you look at some of the guys that came out of there, from superstar Billy Graham to the Junkyard Dog, Jake the Snake Roberts. And again, okay, you can't forget Bret and Owen Hart and all of the Harts that came out of there and that were just raw talent that Stu was able to take and work with, whether he took them in the dungeon to teach them, how to hook and how to shoot. That was Stu Hart. And Stu then gave them the ability to work every single night. Like I said, those were some tough trips to make, especially in the winter. But they made them, and they had steady work, and Stu paid steadily. And, I don't know how good of a payoff guy he was, but he was fair. And guys kept coming back, and they kept coming back because they knew that if you could go to Calgary and make it, again, it was a place that Stu had connections everywhere. Usually the next place you'd talk about is Stu would pick up the phone and call the Funks. I say, hey, I got this guy. He came and maybe work for you down there, and I got the charisma, and an endorsement from Stu Hart.
Carried a lot of weight.
But dude, you were made. If Stu said, yeah, man, use this kid. That's where Jake learned. Jake went up there and worked for Stu and got it down. Sylvester Ritter, Big Daddy Ritter. Because guys that wanted to be in the NFL couldn't make it. Well, your next bet is go to the Canadian Football League. So if you're like in the Edmonton League and on that side of the world, man, Stu Hart and Calgary Wrestling was on TV. In the off season, if you don't want to go back, well, I'm going to go over here and learn to wrestle. So Sylvester Ritter did, the Junkyard Dog. And the guy, Big Daddy Ritter, he had charisma. It was a shits, but he had charisma. And man, Stu would get him booked. Stu got him booked, and he comes down, and Watts makes him the Junkyard Dog, big nasty heel. And holy shit, did he have charisma? And learned. Was he the greatest worker in the world? No, but yes, because he knew how to draw. And so, to me, the greatest worker in the world is the guy that knows how to draw.
Yeah,
I don't give a shit if it's a 18-star match in the Tokyo Dome or the Fujiwara gimmick David Snapes.
The people want to see it. Yeah.
Draw money.
Yeah.
Draw money, and then you're a great worker.
That's right. So
that was, Stu would make that evaluation. If Stu gave that endorsement, then you were made. Bad news. Okay. Bad news. Alan Quage is like, holy cow. Sitting in Calgary, and Pat Patterson calls him one day and says, hey, would you like to come to work? Yeah. Made a Bad News Brown. But Calgary is where really Bad News shine. He had a horrible reputation. But yet in Calgary, man, Stu had no problem with him. Great guy. And you go back and you watch, man. The stars come out. I think Keith Frankie, Adrian Adonis, working in there, and you see the growth. The Bulldogs got their start in Calgary.
Right.
They got their breaks in Calgary. The other good thing about Calgary is you work Calgary, man, it was a nice tie-in to Japan. It wasn't a horrible trip. So Stu had, was it Ito? But Stu had the connection to New Japan. So guys could get booked in New Japan. So it was a great place to go because you got steady work. You could get a Japan gig out of it, go over there, make some big money, and then come back.
Right.
And Stu it was a wrestling territory, but Stu liked the gimmicks. You could get a bear or a damn lion or tiger or bear or whatever.
Oh my.
Man, they worked there. He had a bear underneath the damn house. Bring the bear out and bear works.
It was a working bear?
A working bear.
So when
he had a working tiger.
Hang on.
He had a working lion.
He just kept these.
Grab a tiger by the tail. And
where did he keep these animals?
Underneath the house.
I mean, you're making that up.
No.
So there was a cage underneath the house where most people would have a crawl space. I thought the dungeon was under the house. I thought the dungeon was
under the house, but you still had like an area underneath the house.
So there was there was an area that was a crawl space, and he kept wild animals in there.
Yeah. Doesn't everybody?
So little Brett and Owen, they're just throwing raw meat underneath the house to feed their pet tiger and lion and bear.
Yeah.
You've told
they used to tease him with Owen. Yeah, and pull him back just in time.
I mean, there's the tiger right there with Stu, but
yeah.
I mean, Bruce, I love you, but there's almost no chance you're going to convince me that motherfucker lived under his house.
Okay, then tell me where he lived.
I don't know. I'm asking. I mean, I've heard of people like, oh, my horse got out. You know, listen, I know people who own horses.
Oh, dude, hang on. Wait a minute. Wait, just a dadgum minute. So, John Meekum, original owner of the New Orleans Saints, spoke to him yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Had a menagerie of animals on Lazy Lane. I could actually give, I think it was 5 Lazy Lane. I can actually give the address now because it doesn't exist anymore. So, had this 12,000 foot mansion, a 5,000 square foot pool house, beautiful pool, and 5 acres in River Oaks in Houston, Texas, and had every African wild animal that you could possibly imagine living there. And one time, it's a true story. One time, a cheetah got out, and the housekeepers and the staff are running down Lazy Lane. For those of you in Houston, no River Oaks and no Lazy Lane.
I just looked it up.
Lazy Lane trying to catch the cheetah.
I mean, I wanted to poke holes in this, but that audio you just heard is when I threw it in my Google machine. And 7 years ago, there was a house on Lazy Lane listed for $20 million.
Yeah, that was Rob's.
So
that was Rob. That was Rob Taylor's who had traded houses with Meekum.
So that's the mesothelioma sponsor from the OG something to wrestle days.
Yes.
He lived on Lazy Lane in a 19.
He lived in that house
in a $19.5 million house.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know houses like that existed in Houston, Texas.
Oh my God. Yeah. It was unbelievable. But it was also 5 acres was a little bit more than was allowed in that area to own, for like a home. But Meekum being Meekum, so John was, he had race teams, man. He had an indie team. He had race teams. AJ Foyt raced for him. He owned the New Orleans Saints. His dad was one of the big 5 of the oil men.
Help me understand though. We're saying this Meekum guy, he too kept a fucking tiger in his crawl space.
Well, he had an area out back. He kept them.
Okay.
And a cheetah. He had a panther. He had, the only animals that he did not get a rhino. I think he finally ended up getting a hippopotamus. There were 3 animals, and we were talking about the other day that he did not get, that he could not get into the States. And how you would get them is you would be able to go out. He was a big game hunter, and he got to the point where it's like, why am I hunting, these animals? He goes, I should be, he appreciated the animals.
Right.
So then he started to save the animals. He wanted to save them. And so he would bring them over into the States, get them into the States. And how he would do it is he would bring over a couple and they would have babies, and he could get the baby because it was in the States, and he would get the baby and bring them to his house. He loved animals. He just loved all animals and wanted to have these animals. He had monkeys, he had lemurs, he had just everything.
So, you ever see Stu wrestle a lion, a tiger, or a bear? Oh my!
I've seen him work. I've seen him work with the bear. Seen him work with the tiger. I don't necessarily think I've ever seen anything in him with the lion, but sure, I'm sure. Look, man, if the bear was trained in the dungeon, it was a stiff motherfucker. So it's not like Nick Adams in Amarillo. Nick's bear was working bear. I think that was Victor or Gentle Ben, one of the two. He had to. They did bend the bear off of the TV show.
Yes.
Gentle Ben.
Yes.
So that was his working. His real name was Victor.
He have like an ID. Did he have to get these guys? I mean, this is the commission era. How did the commission? Did they take that bear's blood pressure?
Yeah, he had to.
So dumb. I mean, they used to have to have
make sure the bear is okay to go in and work. Fuck. What if he's got high blood pressure?
And he's got like a little bear ID with his photo.
Yes.
Do they?
Yeah, they take pictures. They take a picture of the bear. You think I'm kidding?
Well, listen, I understand.
Those assholes had a license for the bear.
That's where I was getting to, because I've seen wrestling licenses where you had to sign it. So do they put a bear's paw print on that motherfucker?
His agent, Nick, was able to sign.
So, but somewhere there was probably a power of attorney that the bear had to do with his agent.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
How do we know the bear wasn't coerced into doing this?
Bears love to work.
Okay. I didn't know that. I'm learning a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. They love to work, man. It's nature.
Okay. So just out in the wild, sometimes you could probably
out in the wild, you need to make sure, first of all, if you're out in the wild and you encounter a bear. You say, you work at heel or baby face. Now, if the bear's a heel, you got to let him call the match.
That's what I wanted to ask you. I know if bears are old school, we've all heard as wrestling fans, there was like a secret handshake, the old limp handshake. I don't think that's a thing anymore, but do you think if you run across a bear out in the wild, you should try the working handshake and just see, so you can know, is this a trained bear?
Most of them, you just ask them straight up.
Right. Now, if you run across two bears in the wild and they're doing spots.
Yeah.
Is it okay for you to cheer, or should you just be quiet? Like if they're running through some maneuvers and things.
If it's worthy. Now, if it was in the Tokyo Dome, then
polite clap.
Have to just like
polite applause.
Politely clap, yeah.
Golf claps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But most bears, yeah, it's most of the time, man, because look, man, they're coming in, they're working on top, and they like to call them.
I really wish right now I had some amazing kind, because I think that would cure what ails me right here. I mean, this feels like a conversation that we're having after we have had a little bit of help from our friends over at theamazingkind.com. Check it out if you haven't already. Use our promo code WRESTLE. This guy, the founder, man, he's one of us. He was in the wrestling business. He worked as a producer and editor for the WWE, working on commercials and marketing. And now, man, he's embraced that entrepreneurial spirit to create The Amazing Kind. They make plant-based pain relief balms, creams, and gels for muscles and joints. And they've got infused oils for mood support and sleep. You can check it all out at theamazingkind.com. And when you use our promo code WRESTLE, you'll get 20% off all of your orders. The entire order will be 20% off, and your body will thank you. Now, don't just take my word for this. Just listen to Bruce Prichard, because Bruce has been put through the ringer. I mean, with the shoulder and the tricep, but The Amazing Kind has been there every step of the way. Right, Bruce?
Help you be pain-free and make you feel a lot better. I cannot say enough about the topicals, but also the CBN, CBD, going to help you sleep, going to help you stay asleep, which for those of you that have insomnia know that, hey man, okay, sometimes it's just hard getting to sleep, but then once you get to sleep, you don't always stay asleep. And this will help you stay asleep. And that's the beautiful thing about it. And it's got something for everything that ails you.
CBD infused oil will help reduce your anxiety and help you relax. And I know that's been really helpful for my wife. The CBG infused oil will also help you with focus. I got my dad using that at the office, and he thinks he's sharper than ever at 60 some odd years old. And CBN, what Bruce was talking about, is the infused oil to help you sleep, not just to fall asleep, but stay asleep. Now, the CBD products, which are like the balms and creams or gels, that's going to help Bruce for sore muscles and stiff joints and backaches and arthritis, or maybe you just spend all day on your feet and you need some just everyday comfort. But buddy, when you're trying to recover, sleep is your friend. And we really recommend their CBD infused oils and their soft gels. They're going to help bring about a sense of relaxation and calmness. As we mentioned, you've also got the topicals, but we're really bragging today about the CBN stuff, the sedative effects, the way it helps you get to sleep, the way it gives you the prolonged sleep, the way it reduces your nighttime awakenings. If you're one of those cats who's waking up 2 or 3 times a night, man, try some Amazing Kind. Hook up the CBN. I know Bruce has had a great time with the roll-on gel. It's been an absolute lifesaver for him during the surgeries. But once you actually are going to try to get the sleep, Get the infused oils. The CBN is what you're looking for. And check this out. They've got 4,000 milligrams of CBD plus CBN, and that's the oil for your mood support and your sleep. Man, it's a 1-2 punch. We recommend it. You will too. My wife is using it. My mom and dad are using it. Bruce is using it. Lois Shivani is using it. Everybody I know who's tried it is a believer. And I don't mind telling you, we've had multiple sponsors for this type of product before. Bruce went out of his way to pick up the phone and call our guy, Dave Green, who works with all the agencies, and said, dude, whatever this was, get me more of that. That shit's the real deal. He's talking about the amazingkind.com, and you can get 20% off with the promo code WRESTLE. Your body will thank you. Go right now to the amazingkind.com and use our promo code WRESTLE. So listen, we know that Stu has a successful territory and carries a lot of weight in the industry, peer to peer. He's going to become a legendary trainer from guys all over America, Canada, even Japan. But once upon a time, he turns the book over for the creative to Bruce and Keith. And I don't think that worked as well. What can you tell us about Stampede and maybe the downhill slope?
Well, I just think that, more than anything, the business was changing in general. And I don't know that Stu necessarily, I think a lot of the old timers after a while, like Paul Bosch, when he was ready to get out, you get to a point where you're sick of dealing with the talent. You're sick of dealing with, and you either hand it over to somebody else or you get out of it altogether. And Stu had, his children there that he could hand it over to. And I don't think it gets talked about enough, but I think that people, Bruce Hart booked, and I don't know that he was the greatest booker in the world at that time, but I will say this about Bruce Hart, because that's not Bruce. Well, Bruce is in the background there. There he is. Bruce, to me, had one of the most creative minds that I've ever seen. I thought that where Bruce was absolutely brilliant at was telling stories. And I just don't know that he had the time. And what I mean by that is that he had the time to really allow the stories to develop, because he was deep, man. He was deep into storytelling. And he would send letters, man, with stories that were, I thought, magnificent. I just think that he was probably way ahead of his time. And you would listen to Bruce, and sometimes I think people dismissed him. But man, he was, to me, I thought he was a great storyteller.
Why didn't he work with you guys? Why didn't he work with the WWE?
Well, I think that there were times that, tried and just for whatever reason didn't work out. But I go back to the Owen and Brett story, man. That was pitched by Bruce to be Bruce and Brett. And, it became Owen. But the depth of story, man, a lot of that was from Bruce. And he would often, just, to read a letter from Bruce Hart is, first of all, it's several pages long. But it's well thought out, man. I just, and for whatever reason, man, I think that Bruce had if he was channeled in the right way, man, good Lord. I thought that he had his gift was telling stories.
74 years old. He's still with us. Hopefully, he hears about the high praise that you gave him here today, and it brightens his day a little bit. It is interesting to think, what could have been if he would have been helping with creative all those years ago with WWE.
Yeah, I think it's just, more than anything, a channeling of those ideas.
The end of Stampede comes, I think, when Vince makes a deal to buy Stampede out, and there's been some controversial discussion over the years about whether or not that deal was seen all the way through. What'd you ever hear about the end of Stampede?
I just heard Stu was, we were taking, look, the stars were coming into WWE, and Vince bought out the territory and gave Stu a check, for basically for taking the talent and got the TV, and I have no idea, anything beyond that.
We should talk about Amarillo, Dory Funk, not Junior, but the daddy. Man, he had Western State sports, and so many wrestlers that we've heard of came out of West Texas. I mean, my goodness. But what can you tell us about Amarillo and Dory's style of booking? I mean, we know what kind of weight maybe that a guy like Stu Hart would carry in the community. We know about some of the consistent great wrestling that we saw in Portland. We know we could always count on the battle royals and Shire in San Francisco. What about Dory Funk? What were some of his trademarks? I know you grew up in the Texas area, so this is one you're going to be very familiar with.
Well, Dory Funk Sr. was, look, I'm partial, yeah, because I grew up, I was born in El Paso, which was an Amarillo town. Amarillo ran Amarillo, Lubbock, Abilene, El Paso, ran some of New Mexico, Albuquerque, Las Cruces, and then every canyon, every single town in between. So they ran the Panhandle, if you will, West Texas. And Dory was a brilliant, just great mind for the business. He understood psychology, did like, a little bit of the blood and guts. He was a king of the Texas death matches. I'll go off on a tangent here, but the Texas death match, the way it used to be billed was could take 2 falls or 22 falls. The match goes until one man can't continue.
Yeah, there's a standing count.
Falls. You have a fall, then you have a 1 minute rest period, and then the guy gets a 10 count. If it's to the finish, it's to the finish. Just beat them once. But anyway, that was always my pet peeve, Texas death match. But Dory was king of the Texas death match. They would, legend. Oh my God, I went 66 falls. But a lot of blood and things like that. Dory was a really rough competitor, but he ruled with an iron fist. And Dory booked, and legend has it. And again, this is where history depends on who's telling you the history. Because I've heard both. I've heard that Eddie Graham, who one of the greatest minds that the business has ever had as well, and people credit for so much in the business, that Dory learned from Eddie Graham. But then I've also heard that Eddie Graham went to Dory to learn from Dory. Now, they were contemporaries, and they both kind of took over things at about the same time. But, the people in the Eddie Graham camp are going to say Eddie Graham taught Dory. People in the Dory camp are going to say that Eddie learned from Dory. So they both had very similar styles. They were both good friends and ran their territories very similar. Dory Sr., who had come from Indiana originally, was involved in the Boys Ranch and the Boys Club in West Texas, which then that's why Eddie Graham got involved in the Boys Club and everything in Florida. It's their careers very, very similar stories. But Dory, ran, he had his sons as the baby faces in Dory and Terry, but he just saw so much more for them and wanted them to be world champion. Knew that he would never be world champion, but by God, he had 2 offspring that definitely could be world champions. And he petitioned hard for them to be world champion, specifically Dory at the time, because Dory was older and had passed on since Terry came. But Dory ran the territory. He ran it. It was his head. It was his ideas. He had people like Ricky Romero, who was top babyface in the territory as well. And Ricky would help out from time to time with the book. Ricky Romero was Jay Youngblood's dad, the Youngblood. So he was a bright guy, but he drew, especially, man, from the Hispanic community. And West Texas has a heavy Hispanic community. So Ricky was always in a very prominent spot. Dory believed in heat. Man, Dory was unbelievable storyteller and would pay attention to the details. Had guys like the Infernos with J.C. Dykes as their manager. With the loaded boot, one of the Infernos, Frankie Kane, who later became the Great Mephisto, under a mask, and he had a club foot. So one of his boots was built up by about 2 inches or so, well, probably more than that, probably about 3 or 4 inches. But he would tap his toe on the mat to load the boot.
Right.
And kick you in the head, and instantly, man, you're bleeding like a stuck pig, and the Infernos would get their heat. J.C. Dykes had a canteen. He would use that canteen as a weapon. You knew there was something in the canteen other than water, by God. Because it hurt bad. I saw Terry Funk. In the first time, if you can imagine, go back, it's 1968, 69. I go to wrestling for the very first time in El Paso, Texas. Now, we had a black and white television. Not everybody had color. Color TV was like really just beginning to be a thing. And television shows, I remember when they used to advertise in Technicolor. It's a big thing, man, if a show was in color. We didn't have a color TV. We just had black and white. So all I saw was wrestling in black and white. Can you imagine as a child going to see wrestling for the first time, and you see the Infernos who look like they were always in gray masks and all that stuff,
right.
J.C. Dykes. J.C. Dykes had bright red hair. I was terrified because it's like I'd never seen anybody with hair that red. And the Infernos, their gear was blue. And then like Terry Funk and Ricky Romero come in and they're wearing like red tights and stuff. I was like, oh my God, like everything came to life. And I don't know why I brought that up, but it was amazing to me. But Dory, for the most part, man, Dory ran the territory. Dory was the booker. Dory was also a conduit to Japan. That, man, you work Amarillo and you'd go over and work for Baba in Japan because Dory had that connection. Dory nurtured that connection. And Baba, that's where Baba, when he came to the States, he came and he worked in Los Angeles. He also worked in the Amarillo territory as a young boy. And I think Anoki did too, probably during the same time, but they would work in those territories to learn how to work Western style, but also you would have the press cover it in Japan. So when they came back to Japan, they were megastars because they had, per the Japanese press, been main eventers and megastars in the United States of America. Holy shit. Can you believe this?
Wow.
And Amarillo was a big place for that, where they would send the young talent that they felt had promise. So Dory ran it. Dory Sr. ran it till 1973 when he passed. The kids took it over from there. Dory was the world champion, so Dory dropped the title in 73. Dory now is going to go, okay, man, I'll go back to Amarillo after I do my runs all around with Briscoe. But Dory ran it for a while, and then Terry threw his hand in there. But they sold it to Blackjack Mulligan and Dick Murdoch, and that's kind of where it just went awry. You had Don Slatton in Lubbock, I believe it was. You had everybody was just going wild. And Murdoch and Mulligan did not know how to run a business. And it just kind of, that's where it died. Because people weren't getting paid. They weren't, it wasn't what it was at one time. And you have to understand that Dory Funk Sr. was at the time in the 70s and late 60s, probably the most prominent influence in the NWA. Sam Mushnick was the president. Sam did Sam's thing and all that shit. But Dory was probably the most influential promoter and influential mind in the National Wrestling Alliance during that time. And he was able to get his son Dory the championship. Some would say that he was able to make sure that Jack Briscoe did not beat Dory for that championship. And then, he passed in 1973 and everything went.
What do you believe on that controversy? Briscoe's not listening. He won't hear this. We definitely won't clip it out and tag him on Twitter with it.
No, I mean, here's the thing. I think that when you go back and look at everything, and I've heard both sides, is that there was no reason whatsoever Dory couldn't come back and drop that title to Jeff.
Right.
And there was somebody made that decision. No, use Harley as a transition. Didn't mean as much. Just didn't mean as much because we had built up the Funk Briscoe rivalry and that match for so long in Houston, knowing the title was going to change. Now, as a kid, I didn't know the title was going to change, but I knew the rivalry. I wanted to see that match. I wanted to, and we didn't get it. So I think regardless, a lot of people say, oh, well, the accident was not even a real accident. I don't know if it was or not. Don't care. There's still no reason whatsoever that Dory couldn't have come and dropped the title to Jack in Houston as promised. Now, Dory will tell you, well, it was the first screw job, it was a fast count. That they took the title off of him in Kansas City to give it to Harley, and that wasn't the finish. Blah blah blah.
Hey, let me ask you.
I've heard that. Huh?
I've also heard. I mean, Terry told me himself that they were trying to. I guess this is maybe more spin, but they were trying to vouch for Harley Race because Harley didn't look like the traditional NWA champion. I guess there was a unwritten rule once upon a time, silly as this sounds, that's not what a champion looks like. And Jeff Jarrett and I have talked about it before because he had heard that the NWA champion couldn't wear long tights. And Terry said the NWA champion couldn't have tattoos and all that sort of stuff. And so by doing it the way they did, Harley was able to be NWA champion. And as we know, wound up after that 57-day run, having multiple other runs. Sure. Had you heard the NWA champion has to wear short? Yeah,
there's a certain look, man. They want to, and first, and he also had to be a legit tough guy.
Yeah,
somebody that can handle themselves. So they liked, Luthez, who was a hooker, and Kaniski was this tough guy. Dory was a legit amateur. Briscoe, obviously, a guy that could handle themselves.
Right.
Terry was a tough guy. Harley, tough guy. But yes, Harley did not fit the look when you're saying, okay, here's our world champion. Our world champion didn't have a gut and tattoos and looked like Harley looked. But once you saw Harley work, you believed him.
Oh, yeah.
There was no doubt about it. But Harley had been another one of those guys that was made in Amarillo. And made in that territory by the Funks. And Harley was loyal to the Funks. The Funks were loyal to Harley. So yes, the Funks were definitely trying to get Harley into that because they knew what a great worker Harley was. And felt that, he was a guy also that looked like he could be beat. So as a heel champion, which for the most part, back in the day, the champion was always portrayed as the heel.
Right.
So you had your top babyface in a spot to win the championship. They're booing the champion. So Harley was good for that. But that was with anybody. Could have been anybody. Do I think that Harley made a great champion once Harley got established? Without a doubt, I do. I think that Harley was an awesome champion because he was tough and he made everybody that he worked with. He made them first. And so but that's beside the point. I don't think that it did Harley any favors to win the title and then drop it to Jack that quickly, because it meant nothing at the time. The rivalry was Dory and Jack. And I tend to believe, business wise, looking at it, however many 50 years, 60 years later, I look at it as just bad business. I don't think that I think the swerve was in to, okay, man, we're gonna switch it. Paul, Houston's still gonna get the title switch. You're still gonna get it, but it'll be with Harley. If Dory was able to work and go to Kansas City and drop the title, he was able to work and come to Houston and drop it.
No doubt. No doubt. Let's why do you think Terry and Dory decided to sell the promotion? I mean, were they just more interested in pursuing their own careers? They liked the lifestyle of a wrestler. They didn't want to deal with the pressure or the responsibility, or why don't you think one of them just picked up where their dad left off, man?
Because too much work.
There you go.
I think that, look at it, man. Terry was going to be the world champion. He was on the road. He loved working. I don't think either one of them necessarily wanted the business end of it at that time. I think they were, both in a position of, let's go out and finish our runs.
Right.
And then go from there.
We're excited to announce a new affiliate partnership with Fanatics. Easy for me to say. The world's largest collection of officially licensed fan gear. It's an easy way to support your favorite podcasts. Shop for your favorite players and teams by going to shopsportsmerch.com. That's shopsportsmerch.com. Or if you're watching along with us on YouTube, just hit that QR code that's up on your screen right now. Or just check out the description below for the link. We'll also have it up on all of our socials. You can shop with confidence for your favorite jerseys, caps, shirts, jackets, hoodies, and more with Fanatics. But be sure to use our special link, shopsportsmerch.com, and that will support our show. Let's talk about another Texas territory and another multi-generation one as well. We talked about Dory Funk and then Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk. Well, what about Joe Blanchard? His son, Tully Blanchard, most of our listeners are very familiar with, but Joe Blanchard, another fellow out of Texas, as I understand it. Joe and Fritz both got started in Stampede Wrestling. How about that? And he starts running San Antonio in 78. And I guess the biggest moment for this promotion happens in 1982, when all of a sudden San Antonio has clearance on the USA Network. Yeah, that's right. Same one that you've been watching Monday Night Raw on forever. Before there was a Tuesday Night Titans or a Monday Night Raw or any of that. USA Wrestling or USA Network aired Tully Blanchard's father's promotion out of San Antonio. What a crazy little footnote in history that is. When do you first remember hearing about Joe Blanchard? Was it from the magazines or did you see the TV or?
No, Joe was a journeyman wrestler. Joe was a guy that other than maybe San Antonio, I don't even think he was ever a steady on top guy in San Antonio, but he lived in San Antonio. Joe was for Dallas when he worked. He would come in, he would be in the opening match or two. Good hand, but not a lot of color, not a lot of personality. Nice guy, super nice guy. But Joe wasn't a Joe wasn't a big star, but he lived in San Antonio. He got the San Antonio promotion, and he was promoting San Antonio for the Dallas office until whatever 78. And he started his own. He broke away from the Dallas booking office so that he was no longer using the talent coming out of Dallas. Joe did his own television show, as did Houston. And so they would do their own thing. And Joe thought, well, hell, I can get my own booker and I can do my own thing. And I don't need Dallas anymore. He didn't like, look, nobody liked paying the booking office their 10% fee or whatever the hell it was. So you had to pay the booking office, first of all, to use their talent. Right. Then you paid the talent. So Joe didn't like that concept and wanted to have his own. He felt that San Antonio and everything south that he was promoting should be his. And broke away. And, the first real booker that he had was Wahoo McDaniel. And man, Wahoo came in, and Wahoo, boy, he set that territory on fire. And Wahoo had a rivalry with Tully that, man, it made Tully a name.
Wow.
Because before, Tully was just, Tully Blanchard, the promoter's son.
I see.
And as great of a worker as Tully was, he was still, I think, in a lot of people's mind, viewed as the promoter's son. He was babyface. Man, turning Tully heel and working with Wahoo McDaniel, man, Wahoo made him. And Wahoo, had a rich history with so many of the top stars around the country that Wahoo was able, as booker, to bring in huge top stars into San Antonio that had never been seen before. So in addition, the Funks now are no longer, champions in the NWA. The Funks and Fritz didn't get along. So Wahoo brought the Funks in because he always had a good relationship with them. Wahoo would bring in, like a Brody from time to time, but Wahoo was building that area. He had Scott Casey locally. He made Scott a top guy. It was Chavo Guerrero Sr. came in and, made Chavo a top guy. It was Wahoo looked at the future. Wahoo was always looking for, and he was one of those guys that would give you, we're going to bring you in. This is what we're going to do with you. Gets over, man, we may do something more. Otherwise, we'll kind of phase you out. But he was always looking for the next star. Okay, who's the next guy that I'm going to be bringing in here to make this work? And Wahoo brought San Antonio to heights it had never seen before. And in the middle of all of that, in Houston, Paul had also become disenfranchised with the Dallas booking office, felt that it had become stale, and saw what was happening with Southwest. Paul made the call and said, hey, they're going to change booking offices. And met with Wahoo and met with Blanchard, and the deal was really contingent on Wahoo, because Wahoo was the one that was really bringing it. And it was Wahoo's ideas. It was Wahoo's angles. It was Wahoo's talent. And one day, Wahoo and Joe, I think, got sideways, probably about Tully. And they said they're going to bring in a new booker, bringing in Dick Slater. And Wahoo had already committed to Manny Fernandez. So Manny Fernandez was coming in to work the territory. And Wahoo had all these ideas for Manny and wanted Manny to be, one of the top guys. And I was there. It was the Hemisphere Arena in San Antonio. And I was there sitting right at the table next to Wahoo when Wahoo made the announcement to the dressing room that, boys, I'm out of here. I'm leaving. I think Joe's bringing in Dickie Slater. Don't know what he's got planned. I got Manny Fernandez coming in to set this place on fire. But this is my last one. I'll see you down the road. And thank you guys for everything. All right. And I'm like, holy shit. And, it was still a few weeks before Dick came in. So Tully took the book kind of in there for a little while. But that really pissed Paul off because Paul had made everything contingent on Wahoo as the booker and liked Wahoo. They had a good relationship. Paul made a lot of money with Wahoo. And Wahoo really had, set the place on fire. And so now you've got Wahoo gone and somewhere in there, even before that, Joe had wanted to crown his own world champion, brought in Adrian Adonis and made him the champion. And it was just, they lost direction. Slater came in, had an accident. Dick was out as booker. Dick was out of commission totally. Tully takes back over as booker. They bring in Buck Robley. Buck Robley comes in. Buck had his crew of guys from Alabama and Pensacola and that territory, the Continental Territory, in Eastern Tennessee, that came in and practically, that was about as close as I think I can ever remember that it was like, holy shit, this is bad.
Wow.
Thinking that, we're like, this is killing the business. It was so bad. It was Kenny Lucas and Ricky Morton on top as tag team champions. Ricky was a skinny little kid, and Ken Lucas was 100 years old and just tiny. And
size mattered back then.
What's that?
And size mattered much more.
Oh, size mattered when you're working with like Brody's and guys that Paul's bringing in.
Right.
And it just was, he was tiny compared to Gino. And Gino was a top heel. Tully, and it just didn't fit. The only big guy that he had was he would bring in Brody from time to time. He brought Duggan in at the very end, and that's where Duggan, was going to cut his teeth and learn how to be a heel with Buck. And then, they finally got rid of Buck. Tully took back over. And that's kind of where Paul was like, I'm done. I can't do this. And Watts called. And it was ironic because Watts called after had one of the biggest shows in the history of Houston with Gino and Tommy Rich in a cage and Bockwinkel and JYD. But that was Paul doing, the work, booking JYD and Bockwinkel and all those guys from outside of the territory to come in and work Houston angles, not work San Antonio angle. And San Antonio was up and down. And then, from there, we went with Watts, and Watts we did Mid-South. But then San Antonio went with a lot of different bookers. They had, at that point, Tully was booking. Then they went to Chavo Guerrero for a while. Fred Barron bought the promotion from Joe Blanchard. Fred Barron was a used car salesman, Barron Motors, and he bought the promotion from Joe Blanchard. And Chavo was the booker. And then, I forget who the hell it was. It might have been Bobby Jaggers, but I know Bobby Jaggers was involved in the angle. They got him kicked off of USA. So they covered Scott Casey with cow manure. And USA looked at that and said, yeah, we don't want that on at noon on Sunday afternoon.
See, I had heard that it was a bloody match with Tully and Bob Sweetan. That wasn't it. It was the cow manure.
It was the cow manure.
Wow.
It was the cow manure. The blood and guts didn't help. But the turning point,
the straw that broke the camel's
USA,
back.
Yeah, straw that broke camel's back was the one thing that USA cited was we don't want somebody being covered in cow crap on our network at noon on Sunday.
Well, they're cool with dog food on a Monday night, but man, it's different. I'm just kidding. You ain't got to get defensive. Come on now. Just having fun. I don't know what I expected when we clicked record today, but I think we need to shut it down. We've gone 2 hours just talking about territory bookers and things, but I want to pick this back up.
Got through half of them.
No, we still got to talk about Paul Bosch. We still got to talk about Fritz von Erich. We still got to talk about Vern Gagne. We still got to talk about Sam Mushnick. We still got to
George
talk about
Scott, Eddie Graham,
the Sheik, the Tunnies. I mean,
Jim Barnett.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. Kevin Sullivan. We'll talk about Jerry Jarrett and Bill Watts, and we're going to do more of that.
Bill Dundee.
Man, what a run that guy had. I can't wait for us to talk about it. You know, when I hear the name Bill Dundee, I don't want you to answer now. We'll talk about it next week, but I always hear, yeah, he got him hot, but at what expense? He hot shotted, and people throw that word around, and lots of wrestling fans use these insider terms. We're going to learn a little bit more about that when we pick up this conversation, hopefully, knock on wood, next week, if we can get Bruce Prichard pinned down. But while everybody's in Australia, maybe we got a little bit of time. And if you got some time, we'd love to see you go ahead and subscribe and hit the notifications bell for our YouTube. It's somethingtowrestle.com. We are going to be going live in the new year, and we don't know exactly when, but we know it's coming, and you'll be able to interact live with Bruce Prichard. You want to be a part of that at somethingtowrestle.com. We're going to be doing lots of fun stuff over there on YouTube, so be sure to check that out. By the way, if you'd like to advertise on our program, man, and you're looking for dudes 25 to 54, we got them. It's so affordable to advertise with us. Find out how easy it can be at advertisewithbruce.com. I also want to mention that you can ask a question about this territory topic. If you've got a question about what we did today or some of the other territories we're going to be covering next week here on the show, ask it. It's pretty easy to do. It's at Prichard Show over on Twitter, at Prichard Show over on IG, or Something to Wrestle over on Facebook. We will be soliciting your feedback. We'll answer questions about today's show, and we'll include topics for next week's territories. We'll get to the Nasty Boys eventually, but I had a lot of fun with this today, Bruce, and I appreciate all the time, man. 2 hours.
See, and you thought that last night, well, I don't know nothing about this, and I don't know.
No, I didn't say that at all.
And I told you, the best is when you don't know.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying, you know, we had a lot of prep. We had people gathering images and newspaper clippings and magazines and posters and graphics and all that shit. And then you're like, nah, let's do something else. And it worked out because, damn it, if we're going to ask you to cook supper, you ought to at least get to pick the groceries. And you did a great job today, Mr. Prichard.
Well, thank you, sirs. That was a lot of fun. We got so much more, by God, and even more in depth and more fun and things to talk about in the same subject that we can get into next time that we are here on Something to Wrestle with.
Bruce Prichard.
Rock on.
I was supposed to say rock on. We'll see you guys next week right here on Something to Wrestle. Hey, in my real life, man, I'm helping people save money. I'd be glad to help you too. If you're looking to buy a house, if you're looking to get out of that apartment, if you're looking to sell your house, if you're looking to fix your credit so you can buy a house, if you're looking to get some pro tips on how to save money to buy a house or how much you need to buy a house, or maybe you're just trying to save some money on your current bills, maybe get rid of some credit card debt, maybe consolidate a car payment, maybe you just need some cash to do some remodels around the house. Whatever it is, we can help you at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket. But man, if we can't help you save some cash, we won't waste your time. You can get a quick quote, even talk to a live person right now at savewithconrad.com, or give us a call toll free, 888-425-0105. By all means, give us a buzz, ask for me. We're right here on the Parkway in Huntsville, Alabama, but licensed pretty much all over the country and able to help you remotely. Seriously, think of me next time you need something in that area. You got a friend in the business. You can also just drop me an email, conrad@savewithconrad.com. If I can be helpful, I'd love to do that. I'd love to let my family help your family. And don't just take my word for it. Go check us out. We got an A+ with the BBB, and you can read all of our 5-star reviews. There's more than 1,000 of them at conradreviews.com. But savewithconrad.com, that's your hookup, man. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-free shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. and you want to talk about early, you can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.